Funding for this edition of Caucus, New Jersey has been provided by Celgene Corporation, committed to improving the lives of patients worldwide. JFK Medical Center, NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, New Jersey Council of County Colleges, the Ollendorf Center, and by the Adler Aphasia Center. Promotional support provided by NJ Biz, All Business, All New Jersey, the Star Ledger, and NJ.com, Everything Jersey, and by New Jersey Monthly, the magazine of the Garden State, available at newsstands.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. More importantly, I want to introduce you to a very special guest. He's back for a second time as part of our three-part series. He is Rabbi Jack Bemporad. He is an internationally recognized theologian, scholar, interfaith advocate. This is a series we're doing in cooperation with the Ollendorf Center. And I'm going to say to you, Rabbi, that the first time we sat down with you and Stephen Ollendorf, it was very meaningful and powerful and profound for all of us. One of the things that came up toward the back end of that program, and I want to pick up that conversation here, we started talking about the 10 principles, if you will, of Judaism.
Yes.
Let's talk about some of them. And by the way, why are they so important for all of us, whether we are Jewish or not?
Well, I think that religion has a tendency of being scattered. In other words, the average person who is a minister or a rabbi, they're so busy doing so many things. They're all over the place, and they hear so many things. They talk about so many things. The important thing is to get back to what are the essential elements of a religion. It's easy to get carried away. It's easy to stress what may be really irrelevant. Sometimes I think about people being involved with irrelevant goodness. Irrelevant goodness. They're good in all kinds of ways, except ways that really make a difference in terms of leading a rational, ethical, spiritual life. So you need some way to focus on what is the really central core of a religion. And what we've tried to do with the 10 principles, and I hope those people who watch this program and see the Ollendorf Center,
they'll see the website right now, they'll go on it.
They can go on that. They will get those principles with a commentary and everything. But what we tried to do was say, what are the really essential elements of Judaism? And what are the essential elements in many ways of all religion, because Judaism has been such a force in producing Christianity, Islam, and the Western world, it seems to me. So one of the things that we basically feel is so central is that a human being is more than just matter in motion, more than an animal, that he has the spark of the divine. And that spark of the divine connects him to something that transcends him, transcends that person, so that he can't just look at what's beneath him, he has to look at what is above, that he's part of something greater, that there's more than flesh and bones, as I say, that there's a spiritual force in things, and that somehow he should connect to that spiritual force. And the best way, according to Judaism, to do that is through rationality.
Rationality.
Why rationality? Because what we believe has to be credible. You have to say, yeah, this makes sense to me. This is the way things are. It has to be true. Truth is a really significant religious value. So the first thing, it has to be rational. Secondly, it has to be moral and ethical, because without ethics and morality, you don't have religion. It's sad that people seem to think that religion has nothing to do with ethics, but according to the prophets, according to Judaism, ethics is the real center of religion. How I relate to my fellow human being, whether I'm compassionate and caring, whether I'm able to put myself in his place or her place.
Empathize.
Empathize. You know, Hillel says that don't judge your fellow human being until you stand in his or her place. In other words, not only how does he feel or she feel, but with what eyes is he or she looking at me? Unless I can put myself in the other person's shoes, I don't have that core, that sense of connectedness, you see.
But Rabbi, let me push back here and say, or ask this question, in these very difficult economic times, what would you say to those who say, Rabbi, that sounds wonderful, that sounds beautiful, but I'm so busy, I'm so consumed by trying to keep my life together, put food on my family's table, you're asking me to try to empathize and think about someone else's world.
Where do you think the ideals of caring for the poor, the needy, the hungry, the orphan, the widow, the stranger. Where does that come from? It comes from the Bible. One of the great things about this Pope, Pope Francis, is that he's saying just exactly that. He's saying, look, religion has to connect itself to the real, meaningful issues of life, which is, how do I relate to my fellow human being? How do I care for the stranger and the poor and the widow and the orphan? That's religion. Now, if a person
That's religion?
that is religion.
Someone says that's community service, you say?
No, that's not. That's, if you look, for example, at the prophets, Amos, Hosea, Micah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, they all speak about my commitment to my fellow human being. Religion has to do with the promises that I make, the promises I keep, and the promises I break. And what are the promises I make to myself, to my fellow human being, and to God? Which ones do I keep and which ones do I not? Now, it seems to me that the average person who's saying, look, I've got to have a life and I'm worrying about putting that, he's right. He has that worry.
Yes.
But unless he feels that he's connected to something that transcends him,
bigger than he or she is.
bigger than he is, unless he feels that he lives according to certain principles, ethical principles, unless he feels that he's connected spiritually to others and to God, he's going to find that just putting bread on the table is not enough to satisfy him as a human being.
And what does that do? The cumulative effect of more people living like that, Rabbi, what is the cumulative effect on society as a whole?
I think it'll mean that we're going to be much more compassionate, we're going to be much more caring, and it will bring about a better society and a greater society.
Is that, in fact, by the way, one of the...
That's essentially what Pope Francis is saying.
Well, it's interesting. You're talking about Pope Francis, you know, the head of my church, if you will,
Yes.
and you're talking about the 10 Principles of Judaism.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. This, when I talked to Stephen Ollendorf about this, and we started talking about doing this series, and I asked the question, well, so this is a conversation about Judaism. It's much more than that.
Yes.
And it's for people who happen not just to be Jewish.
Yes, I think that any really authentic engagement with ethics and rationality is ultimately Jewish.
Is ultimately Jewish.
Ultimately Jewish. And
Explain
if you look
that.
at, well, because I believe that if you were to look at where does the concept of a rational religion and where does the concept of an ethical religion come from, it comes from the Bible. And the Bible is the foundation for both the New Testament and the Quran. And in fact, all real transformation in Christianity, if you look at the history of Christianity, it's a return to the Bible, to the Hebrew Bible.
What about when things just happen? I mean, didn't Albert Einstein, this fascinating quote, a coincidence is God's way of being anonymous?
Yes.
Stuff happens.
Yeah, no, it doesn't just happen. What it means is that there's something beyond. There's some way that God organizes the world in such a way as to make things happen for the good. And we may think it's a coincidence. We may think, well, it just happens. But no, it's the way God operates in the world in a way that's subtle. It's the way of God's being subtle.
Even if we don't understand what that is.
We may not understand it, but if we look further, we will find that these connections involve a whole series of factors that means that we're in a world that's created, that's guided, and that is, in a sense, supported and recreated by God. And unless we know what our connection to God is, we're going to fail to understand what it means to be a human being.
And finally, I asked you this last time, I'm going to ask you again. I'm going to ask you in the third segment. By the way, it's a three-part series we're doing in cooperation with the Ollendorf Center. And go on the website to see that previous program as well as programs going on, great initiatives at the center. Question, someone says, I can do all those things, Rabbi, without a connection to religion. You say?
Well, the reality is that I don't think that's true. I think if you do all those things, you're basically religious. Because what you're saying is, I'm doing all these things because I feel that by doing these things, I'm going to make the world better.
Yes.
Which means there's going to be a future. Which means there's an orderly universe where ethical action will make a difference. Well, how do I explain this orderly universe that ethical action will make a difference? I can't say it's matter blindly running. I can't say it's all chance. I have to say that there is a created, rational order to which I can contribute to and make it better. In this sense, I'm working with God. So I'm a co-creator with God. I'm not just doing what's right. And where did I get this idea of right? Where did I come across the idea of peace, for example, as being a noble ideal for all of us?
It just happened.
No, it came from Isaiah, who says they should beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor accustom themselves to war anymore. Where did that come from? It came from Isaiah. It came from the Bible. It came from religious texts.
I am very glad we brought you in here, Rabbi, and we're very Glad we're bringing you back for part
Thank
3.
You. My pleasure.
Rabbi Jack Bemporad, appreciate you joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Looking forward to the last segment. Stay with us. We're right back right after this.
If you would like more information on this program, or if you'd like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Visit us online at caucusnj.org, or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato, PhD.
Urs Gauchat is Dean of the College of Architecture and Design at NJIT. That is the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Urs, good to have you back.
I'm glad to be back, Steve. Thank you.
We're doing this program right before a very big United Nations summit is being held on what is called design, resilient design. Even though it's being held before, it's going to be talked about a lot after that. What is resilient design, and why do we need to understand it?
I think everyone knows that we have 100-year storms more often. The natural disasters are becoming more frequent, more intense, and more people are in danger. So it's, we don't have the luxury of adjusting over a long period of time. In a Darwinian sense, for millions of years we adjusted because changes were relatively slow. Now they're coming faster and faster. And I think the global weather changes have made it imperative that we think about what are the strategies, what can we do? We know there'll be another Sandy. We'll know there'll be storms bigger than Sandy. But across the world, it's a real issue of what do you do with natural forces.
Okay, but here's the practical question. Academics like yourself and others, researchers look at this. People in the architectural world think about it. But there's a practical question. To be very candid, this weekend before we did this show, we're down the Jersey Shore, and our family, we were looking at homes right there on the beach area. Are we ridiculous for even doing that just because we are next to the Atlantic Ocean? And you're saying, what are you doing there?
Well, I think there's a big question of, and the question is, should you build or shouldn't you build?
And if we do, does resilient design, if you will, protect us?
It can protect you, but I think there are places where managed retreat is a reasonable proposition, that you reduce the risk by going to areas that are safer, that are less prone to...
But the homes are already there.
If the homes are there, you have to figure out how to keep them there and how to keep them as safe as possible. What are the strategies? If you're dealing with a place like New York, you can't move New York up the Hudson River. So something very different has to happen there. So the idea of managed retreat is not going to work.
Why don't you give people a couple practical ideas as to what we need to do with what's there already?
I mean, if you're thinking of how to protect yourself, take earthquakes as an example. We have learned over the last 100 years how to deal with earthquakes. We can make earthquake-proof buildings. Tokyo, an earthquake happens quite often, and so it shakes, the pictures fall down, but the building stands up. And just as we were able to deal with earthquakes, we can also deal, in many cases, with the onslaught of water, with storms, with floods. We can build so it stands up. That is not a big issue.
It's a different material,
obviously, you do it more slowly.
Is it different material?
It's different material, it's different engineering, it's different connections to the infrastructure. How do you make yourself survive another Sandy or worse in this area? But there are other areas in the world where you have floods. And think of Bangladesh. You have 1 foot rise in water, 24 million people have to find another place to live. That's very tough. They're slums. You can't give them the technology to resist that. So you'll get huge migrations of people that have no place to live. This is a worldwide problem.
Which is why the United Nations is dealing with it.
The United Nations is tackling this problem, which is very gratifying, and at the highest level, which means that it's a problem that the world will engage. And when a problem is engaged, solutions pop up, and then the political will is created to actually do something about it. This is a very big problem. How do you get the political will to do something?
But what do we mean political will? Like, so in Holland, they have these dikes, okay? So say in the United States, we should say, hey, look what Holland's doing. We need to do that. Does that take political will?
Yes, it does, because who pays for it? Now, if you can afford to build a house on the beach.
Or take one that is there right now.
And you can afford to do what is necessary. Somebody who is not well off, who lives on the shore in New Jersey, they don't have a choice. They're living there, they're trying to repair it somewhat, usually putting it back the way it was. And
is that a mistake?
Yes.
It is.
In the long run, it's
but that's
not
all
going
they
to
have.
Work. And the problem
that's all they can afford.
The problem is if you have insurance, the insurance is going to go up, and people that are poor will be forced out. It's not something I'm for unless there's the political will to say this is a common problem. Somebody other than the homeowner pays for it. So this line of who pays for it gets to be very much in
I think you're talking about
play.
the government paying for it, which means
I'm not advocating that. I'm saying it's a debate. It's a debate.
We need to have an open, robust debate as to who pays for it, if not the homeowner.
Right.
And by the way, whose responsibility of it is it, if not the homeowner?
Is it a collective responsibility? Is it an individual responsibility? That debate is still to take place.
And finally here, you're saying, Urs, we have to have that conversation, that debate, because if we don't, what is the price we pay?
The price we pay is that we will have a repetition of the devastation of Sandy over and over and over again, and we cannot afford to go down that path. It's not an option. And it will become more severe, and it will become more critical to have the political debate about who's responsible and who picks up the pieces.
Urs Gauchat is the Dean of the College of Architecture and Design at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and every time you join us, we learn something new. I want to thank you, Urs.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Stay right there. We're right back right after this.
If you would like more information on this program, or if you'd like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Visit us online at caucusnj.org, or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato, PhD.
There he is, former New Jersey Governor Tom Kean. He was known as the education governor across this country when he was governor from 1981 to 1989.
90.
That's right. You officially left in
right.
January of 1990. Governor, you honor us by being here. Last time we sat down and talked to you in Newark at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. We did a half-hour special with you. It was wonderful. I want to pick up that conversation. Let's talk about education reform, if you will.
Okay.
You're connected to an organization called JerseyCAN. What is it, and what are they trying to do?
Well, it's an organization actually came from outside of the state. It's in a number of states. What they're trying to do is not grade the schools, but give enough information about the schools so parents and those of us who live in the community can really find out what they're doing, whether they're really educating kids, and can get information that's impartial. It doesn't come from the school itself. It doesn't come even from an official authority, but it's from our organization. It's just trying to tell you, what does your school need to do to get better? And is your child getting the kind of education that will prepare them for life or prepare them for college or whatever?
Governor, let's define. The term education reform gets thrown around a lot. Be precise and specific. What does it mean to you?
Education reform means creating schools in this country which will enable us to compete with the rest of the world, will enable your children, my children, our grandkids to get jobs and to have the kind of prosperity and good life that we've had in our generation, expand it to the next. Right now, if our schools aren't doing it, if our schools aren't educating kids to compete with the rest of the world, this country and those of us who live in it are not going to have the standard of living we do now. And the schools are it. If we have to educate students up to world standards, and we're not doing it now.
And it's much worse, and you have been particularly concerned, and you're a former teacher. We should let folks know that you taught history.
I taught history, that's right.
You're particularly concerned about urban areas.
I am.
Why are we failing our children in our urban schools at such an embarrassing and alarming rate?
Well, there are so many explanations, really, and it's not all the schools' fault, obviously. It's a problem of poverty and all the things that have to do with poverty, where kids are brought up sometimes without family support, without community support, sometimes even with not good health care. And then they come into the schools with all these problems, and the schools are asked to solve them. So you start from behind the 8-ball. And once they get into the schools, we're not requiring these schools to have the standards that they should. We're not holding up to the bar so that we can measure whether or not kids are getting an education.
Why aren't we doing that, Governor?
Well, it's a lack of will. I mean,
lack of will.
Lack of will. For a long time, I think in this country, we didn't really know what to do. We knew we were failing in the schools. We know other countries were doing better than we were. Didn't quite know why. Education reform has now taught us, for instance, that we need preschool education. That every kid, particularly from poor areas, have to have early childhood education. Yeah, we don't do it. We do it in some places, not in others.
It should be required?
Should be required. Should absolutely be required, because we know it works. I mean, science has told us that.
And someone says, you know, we should. It's too expensive. You say?
It's much more expensive not to. I mean, what it's going to cost this country to have a generation of ignorance is incalculable. I mean, we are not going to be able to survive in the kind of country we have now with the kind of things we have now unless our kids are educated up to a decent standard.
Let's stay on urban education, Governor. Your view of allowing parents in urban areas to get a voucher, otherwise known as school choice, a voucher, a check from the government that would allow them to send their child to a non-public school in which they would not be able to send their child to if they did not have those dollars. Some argue you are skimming off the top, you are hurting public schools and using those public dollars that should all be going to public schools. You say?
Well, I understand that argument, first of all, but secondly, start with public schools. If your child is going to a public school where education isn't taking place, where crime is occurring, where you know no kids are working up to grade level, why shouldn't you be able to get a voucher to go to another public school that's doing a better job?
Within the district?
Yeah, well, no, even outside of the district.
Outside the district?
Yeah, wherever, because look, you kid deserves a public education. We're paying for a public education. A lot of kids, particularly in urban areas, aren't getting them. They're going to schools, and they have to go to that school because it's the neighborhood they live in.
Neighborhood schools.
So they're trapped. So they're trying to get outside of any kind of voucher. But I say, look, let's try public school vouchers first. Let's allow people to transfer within the public school system, because they know. They know if the school is good or not. Parents know that. Parents come up to me and said, our kids are stuck here. There's no way we can get out unless we pay. Unless we pay more than we have to pay. And so, look, I think vouchers should be experimented with. It's one of education reform's challenges to see if we can get vouchers right. But let's start with public schools.
Teachers, when I was in the state legislature for a very short period of time, one term, 84 to 86, when you were governor, one of the items that came up was increasing the pay for teachers and public school teachers. You were the leader of that effort. Do we pay public school teachers nearly enough, A, and B? What do you say to those who argue, well, they don't really work a full year, and so that's why we don't pay them more?
Look what they do. Does anybody do a more important job than educating the next generation? No, they're not paid enough. Not even paid nearly enough. For instance, and let me be radical. Why do we pay administrators more? Is their job more important? I went to teachers college and saw good teachers moving into administration because it paid more. That's nonsense.
They left teaching
yes.
to go to administration because they were paid more.
Paid more.
And therefore
that's
those children lose out because they lose that
that's
teacher.
Right. Exactly right. And that's the system we have. Nobody should pay more than a great teacher. I mean, I think great teachers are the most important people in our society. And the more of them we can get, the more of them we encourage, the more people we get into the profession, the better. And one of the ways we would do that in this economy of ours is through monetary means, through salaries. We don't pay teachers nearly enough. Now, to do that, we may have to have some scale. We may not be able to pay the same teachers the same thing.
How about merit?
That's
pay
what
them,
I mean.
Merit, pay more.
Got to do it.
And for the NJIT and others who argue, New Jersey Education Association and others who argue that is a bad idea because you promote competition and potentially the lack of cooperation and collegiality among teachers because they'll be fighting for that merit pay.
Hope so.
Hope so.
Because they've got to be good to get it. Why should teaching be the only profession in this country where you don't get paid 1 cent more for being good at your job? Makes no sense at all. If you're a great teacher, we want you to stay in the system. We want to point you out and say, this is what you can be. We want to recognize you, and we want to promote you, and we should pay you.
Teaching is not different from other professions because of the nature of the job.
Look, every profession is different from any other profession because of the nature of the job. But there's no reason that's the only profession you can't measure. It's difficult to measure. It's difficult to measure any merit. But every other profession, every other business promotes people on merit. If you're really good at your job, you get paid more and get recognized more. Great teachers should be treasures of the community. We should write them up in the local papers. We should surround them in wax and hold them up as models to everybody. They're doing more for the society than anybody can imagine. So yes, pay them more.
Governor, you mentioned the term treasure to the community, and I hope I do not embarrass you, but in the few seconds we have left, you are a treasure to this state. And every time those of us who have the honor of being in the world of public television get to interview you, you honor us by your presence. So I thank you for being with us, not just for being the education governor, just for being a great governor in the state. Thank you, Governor Kean.
You're too kind. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
The preceding program has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating 25 years of broadcast excellence, and 13 for WNET, NJTV, and WHYY. Funding for this edition of Caucus, New Jersey has been provided by JerseyCAN Corporation, JFK Medical Center, NJIT, New Jersey Council of County Colleges, the Allendorf Center, and by the Adler Aphasia Center. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. Caucus, New Jersey has been produced in partnership with TriStar Studios. This program has been made possible in part by Meridian Health.